This woman was a member of the Boston College Eagles Women's Club Water Polo team from 2013 to 2017. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in psychology and history, she began a career in wilderness therapy as a field instructor in North Carolina. She then switched coasts to go to Oregon and become a field specialist, and then gave up mental health practicing altogether as she then turned her attention to horticulture. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Eliza Gross, and just for our viewers, total disclaimer here, no relation to yours truly. Eliza, thanks so much for agreeing to appear on CWPA Remote.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So how and why did you end up choosing Boston College?
Ooh, that's a great question. When I was in high school, my brother actually attended Boston College. We are far enough apart that we don't overlap in high school or college. And initially, I didn't want to go to school where my siblings had gone. I wanted to do something different. So I was kind of hesitant about looking at BC. But my parents convinced me that it was worth giving it a shot, going to see a tour of the school, talk to some people, see it for myself instead of just as where my brother went to college. And once I stepped on campus, that's kind of when I was sold. Ultimately, it was kind of a tough decision. I almost ended up at a school in Colorado. It kind of came down to a few different things. And the club water polo team at BC was actually one of the things that kind of tipped it over the edge for me to say yes. I wanted a school that had some D1 sports. I liked football, I liked to be able to go to games. I wanted to be, close to a city, but not necessarily like smack dab in the middle of a city. And like I said, I really wanted to keep playing water polo and have that kind of athletic component without too much of a commitment. I didn't want to do varsity swimming, which I had definitely considered. And so having the option for a club water polo team was right up my alley, and my brother played club water polo at BC as well. So knowing from him what his experience was like, I was pretty excited about having that opportunity to, have that team kind of camaraderie again for another 4 years.
Okay, and what was your first practice like, or your first practice week?
Yeah, I remember being really, really nervous. My family jokes with me a lot still that I shouldn't have been, just the caliber of player I was. But walking in as a freshman, you just have no idea how a team is going to look. You don't know how good they are, how competitive, how many people are going to get cut. Are they going to hang on to the people who've been there a few years in favor of them instead of freshmen? So I remember being insanely nervous, and I think there was like 10 of us freshmen who went out for the team. So it was kind of a big crew. But immediately like nerves kind of calmed down, and I just remember being really welcomed into the team right away, and really enjoying that atmosphere.
And what about your first game?
First game, I've been thinking about this, was not super remarkable. We played, I believe it was the Coast Guard. They, my freshman year, were in our division. After that, I don't think they were in our division after that. But it was kind of a game that typically we use to like give some of our starters a rest. So it was a good shakeout game for the first tournament, my first game in college, get the nerves out of the system, kind of see how we actually play together in a competitive setting, and see the cohesiveness of the team put together.
Okay, and what's your single best memory of playing on the team?
Single best memory. I think just generally the amount of laughter that we got to have on the pool deck. Our team was maybe like gave ourselves a little bit of a bad reputation for being like what some people might perceive as obnoxious, because my freshman year we started a tradition of doing a dance to the song The Wobble, and then we would also sing along to the song Jane Fonda, which is not necessarily appropriate to sing on a pool deck. But it was something that we started doing, and I don't really know how or why, but it became like a pre-game ritual for all of us before like a big game or one that we were particularly nervous about. We'd be dancing up in the stands or on the pool deck, and just like it was a great way to keep our mind off of what we were nervous about, kind of shake some of that out, all get on the same page, loosen up, relax, and just like remember that at the end of the day, like we're there to have fun and compete. And it was a club sport, not a varsity sport where we're like fighting for scholarships or things like that. So just having fun and being together. Yeah, it was very fun to sing and dance along on the pool decks.
Any video records of it?
There probably is somewhere. I don't know that I want to see them, but I'm sure there is somewhere on somebody's phone.
What about the flip side of things? Any disappointing events with the team?
Definitely. Yeah, I think personally, like when I was there for 4 years, we did not qualify for nationals. And that was like a huge goal for a lot of us. And the year after I graduated, they did, which was super exciting. And it had been the first year in quite a few years at that point. But I remember, let's see, it was my junior year, was definitely the year I felt like we had kind of the team that had the best chance at it. And we were playing Middlebury in our, division championships. And I think it was the semifinals. And we knew Middlebury was going to be our toughest competition that tournament anyways. So it was kind of like the championship game for us. And I was a whole set, whole D player. And I got kicked out for the third time with 5 minutes left in the game. And I just remember like being absolutely devastated. And we were kind of about to turn the game around. We were down a few goals. We've been coming back. And that was kind of like just, yeah, a pretty horrible moment. And unfortunately, we lost that game by like 2 goals, I think, or something like that.
Well, you had a great career there anyway. How about the funniest thing that maybe happened along the way with the team?
Oh, I mean, the funniest thing is probably the dancing on the pool decks. It was kind of just one of those things that you can't really pinpoint why or when or how it started, and it doesn't really make sense. We don't really know, who was the first one to do it. But the first few times we did that was definitely some of the funniest moments.
So if I go to YouTube and research Boston College Water Polo Wobble, I'm going to find it. Is that the deal?
I don't know about that. You would probably have to look up games that happened before us and then look for the pool deck behind the game. And I'm sure you'd find us somewhere in the background. When we played at BU, a lot of times we would do the dance over by the diving well and things like that right before we're waiting to get in the water for the game.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Be on the lookout for it. Before we get into your current endeavor, and your career, despite not being very long at this point, has taken a lot of turns, and we want to wind our way along with you with that. Tell us about your initial choice for career. I mean, wilderness therapy, it's a specialized industry, and if you can call it an industry. And how did you get there?
Yeah, wilderness therapy is definitely something most people haven't heard about, or if they have, they don't really have a good idea of what it is. No reason for them to know about it per se. It's kind of
this is the reason. So educate us right now.
It's a small industry, but it's a branch of the mental health world. And specifically, most programs work with adolescents. So for me, I was a psychology major at BC, a psychology and history major, and initially was pretty drawn to the mental health world. But my sister had gone to college in North Carolina, and after graduating, she had kind of found her way to wilderness therapy. And so initially, that was my first contact of it. And I had no idea what she was doing at work, even when she was working there. And I'd never really considered it for myself because I hadn't really had a whole lot of exposure to camping and hiking and backpacking. I grew up outside of Chicago in the suburbs. It's not something that's like super accessible there. And so it took a little bit of my own experience hiking and things like that for me to be, more aware of the fact that like nature has such a profound impact on us. And so talking with my sister, she suggested, why don't you just come for an interview and see what it's like, see what you think, and go from there. And so I did. Wilderness therapy is pretty unique in the way that they run interviews. So typically it's kind of called a hiring seminar, and it's a weekend long, like typically 3 days, sometimes longer, backpacking trip basically. So you go down to wherever the company is based that you're interviewing with, and basically they give you an experience like the kids who are there would have. And so we were backpacking, and I just so happened to go in January in North Carolina. And if you've ever lived in the Southeast, January can mean that it's 71 day and 30 degrees and snowing the next. And that's exactly what we got. We had like 40 degrees and rain. We woke up to snow the next day. And then the day after that was like 70 and sunny. And so it was kind of a brutal wake up to what it could be like working in the woods, just, having nature be a component of it. But I really enjoyed the concept and the style of work that it is. And so ultimately I decided to go down for the summer before my senior year and work there. And it is shift work. So I would work for 8 days on, so Wednesday to Wednesday, and then I would get off on Wednesday evening and have until the following Wednesday morning off. So I'd have 6 days off in a row. And during that time, I worked with one or two other co-staff, and then we would work with typically a group of students, somewhere between like 6 students and 10 students, with varying mental health illnesses. So depression, anxiety, bipolar, trauma, things like that, kind of a big spectrum of different, mental health stuff. And so we would backpack with them, teach them communication skills, conflict resolution skills, practice expressing emotions in healthy ways. We would teach them how to build fires and, set up a tent and all this different stuff. So it was a lot of hard skills, and then as well as like the soft emotional skills. So yeah, I did that and I fell in love with it. I couldn't believe that a job existed like that. It's definitely a job that gives you some of your highest highs and lowest lows. It can be really, really intense work, as well as really rewarding and really fun. So I went back to BC for my senior year and finished up my degree, and then moved back down to North Carolina and continued working for that company for the next year after that.
Okay, well, you mentioned that there's a lot of really high highs and really low lows. So can you give us an example of each?
Yeah, definitely. High highs is like I've worked with a student who really, really struggled initially while there, and they're there only for about 3 months. It's typically like an assessment program. So we're trying to figure out what the best fit is for this student moving forward. And just really struggled with communication, with following instructions, struggled with peer-to-peer conflict, struggled with conflict with us as staff, and just generally was like a very, very challenging student to have and work with. And ultimately by the end of his time there, and then once he graduated and moved on to his next, his next steps, he wrote a letter back to us, apologizing for the things that he did that were really tough to handle, but then also recognizing and saying like how impactful that experience was to have people constantly there, and kind of the unconditional compassion and unconditional support. No matter what he said or what he did, we were still there for him, and how impactful that was for him moving forward, and how much he took away from the experience, even though, in the moment it doesn't necessarily feel like they're per se learning that much or they're changing that much. A lot of times it's not about seeing the growth, it's about planting the seeds and kind of creating the environment that hopefully someday that seed sprouts.
Okay, and on the other end of the scale?
Yeah, I worked with a student very, very closely that wilderness therapy was just not a good fit for her. And unfortunately, like a lot of healthcare systems and, just generally systems in our world, things can move slowly. And so even though it was identified that she was not, getting what she needed in terms of support or treatment options at our program, it took a long time for us to find something that had what she needed. And so it was really difficult to know that like she was continuously being kept in this place that is the safest place for her at the time, but isn't the best place for her, and we couldn't get her to the best place. And so that waiting game, and that knowing that there's something better, but we can't make it happen any faster, and knowing everybody's doing their best. But it was very tough, and she was a very challenging student as well, that I definitely bonded with and definitely worked really well with, but lots of challenging moments with her. And I think, like I said, just like the waiting game of knowing that these systems take time is really frustrating.
I can really understand that. So all of a sudden you decide to flip coasts. How'd that happen? Where'd you go? What'd you end up doing?
Yeah, I eventually got a little tired of sleeping on the floor of the forest every single day for 8 days. And I wanted to kind of take a step up into a different role. So I had the opportunity to take a field specialist role with a wilderness therapy program out in Bend, Oregon. And so that role was more around training staff and then supporting them. So at times I was with the groups and, maybe giving a staff a break, stepping in for them. I did spend one night a week out in the woods with the groups, bring them food if they needed more food, things like that. But it was really cool because I got to help devise the training. So typically on the Wednesday, or for this program, I believe it was Thursdays that we did staff exchange. Every single staff that works at the program is there on the same day. And so Thursdays are a really, really, really big training day. And that's kind of the only time we see all these staff together. So I had a couple other field specialists that I worked with, and we would work on trainings around, self-care, or how to run therapeutic groups, or how to de-escalate students in different scenarios. And all four of us had experience working in that role. And so we got to bring our experience to these trainings, and what we had found helpful, what we had learned in the role that was helpful, and challenge the staff to learn and practice their skills. So that was really, I really enjoyed that part of the job for sure.
But you kind of decided no. So take us through what's happened since then.
Yeah, so that job I had taken on a seasonal basis. A lot of jobs in wilderness therapy start out as seasonal, and they tend to hire more people in the summer because we have more students in summer. And I had the option to continue on after the summer was over. And I really did enjoy Bend, Oregon, but I missed North Carolina and my community there a lot. So I decided to make the move back to North Carolina, across the country once more. And I found a job working with adult women at an addiction treatment program in North Carolina. So that was a residential program. So I was out of the woods finally, which was kind of nice to have a little bit more of a regular sort of a 9-to-5 job, and worked there for a while before being asked to step in as the program manager of a new program that they were opening. So this program was for adolescent boys struggling with addiction and other mental health issues. So I stepped into that role, and working at a new program is extremely challenging. Generally, everybody is working more hours than they should be every single day, and kind of doing everything they can to support the students and support the staff. But a lot of times it feels like it's not quite enough. So it's definitely a very difficult job. I got to challenge myself in a lot of ways that I thought I was ready for, but now that I reflect on it, maybe wasn't quite ready for. But it was a really good learning experience to understand that program manager role, because that was a job that I had wanted, and that was a dream to have that job. And once I had that job, realizing that maybe this isn't what I actually want to be doing. And so after about 6 months in that role, I decided to quit. And I didn't have anything lined up at the time. I just wanted to take some time off, kind of move away from mental health. I just knew that that was not where I wanted to be spending my time on a daily basis anymore. It had become really draining for me. I had decided that I didn't want to become a therapist, which was kind of what I had been debating a lot of this time. And so I wanted to take some time to figure out what was next. Kind of dabbled around with some different part-time jobs, and the pandemic hit. And like I'm sure so many people that I've talked to and watching this, very much gave me some time to reevaluate what I was doing, what I wanted to be doing, where that was going to take me and things like that. So I spent a lot of time during the pandemic kind of dreaming up different ideas, and ultimately decided to move to Colorado and move again. To establish residency so I could start going to school. And I started school with the plan to pursue a certificate in horticulture. However, that kind of changed as I learned more about what I could do with my previous bachelor's degrees and where that could kind of get me with my work experience. So I am actually pursuing a master's in horticulture now. So I have a few more semesters worth of prerequisites that I have to do because I did not take any hard science classes in my undergrad. And I'm paying for that a little bit right now. But yeah, I'm really excited to be on this path now, doing what I'm doing. And it's, if I can take a positive out of the pandemic, it's definitely the positive of kind of giving me that time and that reality check to figure out where I wanted to be going next.
Okay, speaking of which, once you've got your master's, where does Eliza go from there?
I do not know. It's going to be several years before that happens. We're looking like 3.5 years down the road. So right now, I'm just excited that I know what I'm doing for the next 3.5 years. And I know my parents are very excited that I'm staying in Colorado for the next 3.5 years. So no more coast to coast moves, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, hopefully, building the network that I am here will provide me some really great job opportunities once I'm done with my master's.
And is there club water polo where you're going and getting your master's?
There is actually.
Oh, you got a chance to make nationals.
I do. It is a pretty new program. So I'm hopefully doing my master's at Colorado State University up here in Fort Collins. But pretty new program. They mostly used to play as a co-ed team. They didn't have enough women to field their own team, but they do now have their own women's team. So that's exciting. It's definitely an idea I've flirted around with, but we'll see. We'll see if I have the time to commit to that, because if I do it, I want to be able to commit the proper amount of time to being part of that team. Also, it's been 5 years since I played water polo, so it would be a brutal road to getting back in water polo shape.
Yeah, well, like you said, you don't have to get into super D1 shape. You can kind of get into a
Correct.
different groove and be excellent in the water.
Yes.
Well, we've talked about your collegiate water polo career, and we've talked about your working career. So can you speak about how you feel that your water polo career in college has affected, helped your working career?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways it has. I think kind of like one of the big things that we have talked about is me switching careers here and switching directions. I mean, I studied psychology and history in undergrad, and here I am now pursuing horticulture. And while I was actually on the water polo team, an older teammate of mine, I think she was a junior when I was a freshman, and she was a physics major, and a very dedicated physics major. And I remember like second semester of her junior year, she decided she wanted to scrap physics and become pre-med. And we were all like, what? Like, how are you going to do this? Like, that's late in your college. Like, are you going to be able to graduate on time? All these things. And she made it happen. And now she's gotten several extra degrees. I believe she's at Stanford right now. She's doing fantastic in the medical world. But I think it was kind of a reminder that no matter where you start doesn't mean that has to be where you keep going. You can always pivot and try something new. It's like rarely ever too late to do something different.
Good words. And speaking of situations, Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you stopped for a second, you said to yourself, you know what? I can draw from that, whatever that is, uh, from my college water polo career and solve the situation?
Yeah, I think in mental health, the working in mental health, it like my water polo experience came in handy a lot. Like I said, I was a whole set and whole D player. I went 2-2 most games, and as most whole D players know, you get kicked out a lot. Whether you should or not is up for debate, right? We always have annoyances with refs and frustrations over, what was happening under the water versus what the refs could see versus what the other player made it seem like we were doing. And so I got kicked out a lot.
Yeah, well,
And
I've never met a center D who didn't say both their hands were up the whole time.
right, right. I mean, we're guilty of it.
Hmm.
But yeah, every time that happens, even like I said in that Middlebury game where I was kicked out for the third time, and I would argue that was some of the worst reffing of the year in that game. It was very, very, very frustrating the entire game, and not just the calls that were being made on me, both ways, all over the place. But it happens, and it's out of my control, and it's something that I can't change in that moment. And me saying something or yelling something or whatever it is to the ref is not going to help anything. And so having to kind of keep my composure, though I think I was known for an eye roll or two, but I never spoke to the refs because obviously that's just not going to help anything. Keeping that composure is so key. And in mental health, working with kids who are in crisis, there are things that you would never expect, you could never dream of happening. They can say things that you would never even guess would come out of a kid's mouth. And you can't react. You have to respond, and you have to take that deep breath, and you have to keep your composure, because it's not about me in those moments. It's about the student and the kid that I'm trying to help. So definitely that composure, that ability to stay calm in moments of high intensity or high energy, was definitely really helpful from water polo.
Okay. Well, you're not old enough to, get the question that a lot of interviewers ask people about what advice would you give to your younger self? So I like to go the opposite direction anyway. So I'd like to know, what would Eliza Gross, the BC college water polo player, tell Eliza Gross, the current master student?
Um, gosh, I don't know. I don't think I could have dreamed where I am now when I was in college. I didn't have this foresight of working with plants. So I think probably just if it feels right, it's right, and go after it, kind of a thing.
And don't forget the steps of the wobble dance.
And don't forget how to do the wobble.
All right. Well, finally, watching today, we've got a lot of high school students that are looking to choose college, their parents watching with them. We've also got college students that are thinking about careers after graduating. What pieces of advice would you give to these two sets of people about how college water polo can impact, your ultimate working career?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to sum up into words because of the impact. It's such a great impact. I mean, my experience at club level, I think, was possibly unique. I don't know how other club sports run at other colleges, but Boston College has an incredible club sports program where the students get to run it. And so my senior year, I actually hired our coach. I was the captain and my co-captain. We interviewed coaches, we read applications, we read resumes, we decided which coach we thought was best, and then we sent that information on to the university to get final approval. But that kind of an opportunity doesn't really happen when you're in college, where you're getting to hire your own coach and you're getting that experience of we have to put out a job listing and we need to look at resumes and what kind of qualities do we want to look for in a candidate. So in terms of that was pretty valuable experience. And then just the ability to have a team and a group of people that's consistently there for you while you're in college is huge. It's absolutely huge.
Well, that's great advice and a great perspective on the whole hiring opportunity and getting practice in that area. You followed up your successful career as a water polo player at Boston College, and as you used to go 2 meter to 2 meter, you went coast to coast, following your jobs in wilderness therapy, and now you've decided to become a winger and go off in a different direction and become a counterattack specialist, I guess, now that you're going to get into
great.
horticulture.
That sounds way better than 2
yeah,
to 2.
Yeah, but I want to thank you, Eliza, so much for agreeing to be part of CWPA Remote Professional Edition and lending your insights into how college water polo can affect your ultimate working career.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to reflect on my time at BC water polo team.
Well, it was a pleasure having you. Until next time on CWPA Remote, this is George Gross Jr. wishing all of our viewers the very best in and out of the water.